All right, 756. At a meeting of the Royal Geographical Society, December 11th, 1922, Sir Francis Younghusband told of a drought in August 1906 in western China. The chief magistrate of Chongqing prayed for rain. He put more fervor into it. Then he prayed prodigiously for rain. It began to rain, then something that was called a water spout fell from the sky. Many of the inhabitants were drowned. In the organic sense, I conceive of people in forests and dwindling lakes all expressing a need and finally compelling an answer. By prayers, I mean utterances by parched mouths and also the rustlings of dried leaves and grasses. It seems that there have been responses. There are two explanations. One is that it is the mercy of God. For an opinion here, see the data. The other is that it is an organism that is maintaining itself. The British government has engineered magnificently for water supply in Egypt. I might have been better to plant persuasive trees and clergymen in Egypt, but clergymen are notoriously eloquent, and I think that preferable would be less excitable tipsters to God who could convey the idea of moderation. In one year, the fall of rain at Norfolk, England is about 29 inches. In Simmons Meteorological Magazine, 1889, page 101, Mr. Simmons told of this fall of water of 29 inches in a year and then told of volumes of water to depths of from 20 to 24 inches that had fallen from May 25th to the 28th, 1889. In South Wales and a greater deluge, 34 inches, that from the 29th to the 30th had devastated Hong Kong. Mr. Simmons called attention to these two bursts from the heavens thousands of miles apart, saying that they might or might not be a coincidence, but that he left it to others to theorize. I point out that a professional meteorologist thought the occurrence of only two deluges about the same time but far apart remarkable or difficult to explain in terms of terrestrial meteorology. It was left a long time to others. However, when I was due to appear, I appeared perhaps right on scheduled time, and I got Australian newspapers. The Sydney newspapers told of the soak in the New South Wales. I learned that all the rest of Australia was left to others, or was left waiting for me to appear right on scheduled time, most likely. Not rain, but columns of water fell near the town of Avoca, Victoria, and in the Melbourne Argus, the way of accounting for them was to say that a waterspout had burst here. There were wide floods in Tasmania. Fields turned to blanks that were then lumpy with rabbits. There had been a drought in Australia, and floods were a relief to a necessity, but the greater downpour in China interests us more in the conditions in China. It was a time of direst drought and extremest famine in China. Homeward Mail, June 4th, that in some of the more cannibalistic regions, sales of women and children were common. It is said to be almost impossible for anybody to devour his own child. Parents exchanged children. Down upon monstrous need came relief that was enormous. At Hong Kong, houses collapsed under a smash of alleviation. A fury of mercy tore up almost every street in the colony. The people had prayed for rain. They got it. Godness so loved Hong Kong that in the town's morgue it stretched out 16 of the inhabitants. At Canton, every pietist proclaimed the efficacy of prayer, and I think he was right about that. But the problem is to tone down all this I can't say that word. Efficacy. Yeah. If we will personify what I consider an organism, what he, or more likely she, has not is any conception of moderation. The rise of the river at Canton indicated that up country there had been catastrophic efficacy. I can't say that word. At Canton, he does it again. Efficacy. That's not it. Was so extreme that for months the people were rebuilding. Show me a starving man, I pay no attention. Show me the starving man, I can't be bothered. Show me the starving man on the point of dying, I grab up groceries and I jump on him. I cram bread down his mouth and stuff his eyes and ears with potatoes. I rip open his lips to hammer down more food and bung in his teeth, the better to stuff him. The explanation, it is the godlike in me. Now, in a library, we put in calls for the world's newspapers. Not a hint have we had that there is anything else. Nothing in scientific publications of the period, not another word from Mr. Simmons. But there is an implement that is mightier than the pen, and we're led on to one of our attempted correlations by our experiences with it. Germany. There was a drought so severe that there were public prayers for rain. Something that was called a waterspout fell from the sky, and people who did not get all the details went to church about it. Liverpool Echo, May 20th. 100 persons perished. At the same time, there were public rejoicings in Smyrna, where was staged another Ossasive tragedy. Drought in Russia, Straits Times, June 6. Droughts ended by downpours in Bengal and Java. In Kashmir and in Punjab, violent thunderstorms and earthquakes occurred together. In Turkey, there would have been extremists' distress, but about the 1st of June, amidst a woe and thanksgiving, destructive salvations demonstrated efficacy. It's not efficacy either. Efficacy. And for a week kept on spreading joy and misery. Levant Herald, June 4th. Earthquakes preceded deluges and then continued with them. In conventional meteorology, no relation between droughts and exceptional rains is admitted. Our data are of widespread droughts and enormous flows of water. There are two little narrow strips of views on the margins of our moving pictures. On one side, that there is a beneficent God. On the other, that there isn't anything. And every one of us who has paid any attention to the annals of controversies knows that such oppositions usually give into an intermediacy. May 1889, widely this earth was in need, widely waters were coming from somewhere. Now, in organic terms, I am telling of what seems to me to be functional teleportation, or enormous manifestations of that which is sometimes, say in Oklahoma, a little drip over a tree. Volcanic eruptions upon this earth at times of deluges. And maybe in a land of the stars, there was an eruption in May 1889. In France, May 31st, there was one of the singularity lurid sunsets that are known as afterglows and that appear after volcanic eruptions. There was no known volcanic eruption upon this earth from which a discharge could have gone to the sky of France. It may have come from a volcanic eruption somewhere else. All suggestiveness is that it came to this earth over no such distance as millions of miles. Other discharges may be red rain coming down from the sky at Cardiff, Wales, red dust falling upon the island of Harris off the coast of France in the Mediterranean. See the Levant Herald, May 29th. St. Louis Globe Democrat, May 30th, an unknown substance that for several hours had fallen from the sky, crystalline particles, some pink and some white. Quebec Daily Mercury, May 25th, to find dust that had the appearance of a snowstorm falling in Dakota. Monstrous festivities in Greece, a land that was bedecked with assassinations. Its rivers were garlands, vast twists of vines budded with the bodies of cattle. The Malay states gulped the mines of Kamunting were suctions into which flowed floods. Ugh. The Bahama Islands were thirst, drought, and loss of crops, then huge swigs from the sky. Other West Indian islands went on gargantuan sprees, and I'll end up a prohibitionist. Orgies in Greece and more or less everywhere else, this earth went drunk on water. I've experimented, tried autosuggestion. You can't You can get a pretty fair little souse from any faucet. Tangier, great suffering from the drought. Abundant rains about June 1st. Drought in British Honduras and heavy rains upon the 1st and 2nd of June. Tremendous downpours described in the newspaper published upon the island of St. Helena. Earthquake at Jackson, California. The next day, a gush from the sky broke down a dam. I'm on a spree myself. Library attendants wheeling me stacks of this Earth's newspapers. Island of Cyprus, a flop from the sky, and the river Pedius went up with a rush from which people at Nicosia narrowly escaped. Torrents in Celion. June 4th, a drought of many weeks broken by rains in Cuba, drought in Mexico, and out of the heavens came a Jack the Ripper. Torn plantations and mutilated cities. Rise of the river at Huzutala. When it subsided, the streets were strewn with corpses. In England, Mr. Simmons expressed astonishment because there had been 2 deluges. Deluge and falls of lumps of ice throughout England. France deluged. Water dropped from the sky at Lausanne, Switzerland, flooding some of the streets 5 feet deep. It was not rain. There were falling columns of water from what was thought to be a water spout. The most striking of the statements is that bulks dropped. One of them was watched, or some kind of a vast vaporous cow sailed over a town, and people looked up at her bag of water. Something that was described as a large body of water was seen at Coburg, Ontario. It crossed the town holding its bag-like formation. 2 miles away, it dropped, splashed rivers, and broke down all dams between Coburg and Lake Ontario. In the Toronto Globe, June 3rd, this falling bulk is called a waterspout. Fall of a similar bulk in Switzerland. Crops and houses and bridges mixing down a valley at Sargans. Fall of a bulk at Rickenbach, Saxony. It was a waterspout. This time, the fishmonger is a waterspout. Spain pounded by falling waters. Madrid flooded, many buildings damaged by a violent hailstorm. Deluges in China continue, and deluges in Australia continuing. Floods in Argentina. People of Ayacucho driven from their homes. Sudden rise of the river at Buenos Aires. In the South American Journal of this period are accounts of tremendous downpours and devastations in Brazil and Uruguay. One of these bodies of water that were not rain fell at Chetnall, Dorsetshire, England. The people, hearing crashes, looked up at the hill and saw it frilled with billows. Watery roughs from 8 to 10 feet high heaved on the hill. The village was tossed in a surf. The cause of this remarkable occurrence was for some time unknown, but it has now been ascertained that a waterspout burst on Battencombe Hill. So wrote Mr. Simmons, in whose brains there was no more consciousness of all that was going on in the world about him than there was in any other pair of scissors. It was not ascertained that a waterspout had burst at Batcombe Hill. No waterspout was seen. What was ascertained was that columns of water of unknown origin had fallen high on the hill, gouging holes, some of them 8 or 9 feet deep. Though Mr. Simmons gave the waterspout's explanation, it did not occur to him to note that there was no statement that the water was salty. These bulks of water and their pendant columns that they were waterspouts, or that slaughter had lain with life, and that the murderous mothers had slung off their udders, from which this earth drank through teats that were cataracts. Wherever the deluges were coming from, I note that as with phenomena of March 1913, unseasonable snow fell. Here it was about the 1st of June, and snow was falling in Michigan. The suggestion is that this was not a crystallization in the summer sky of Michigan, but an effect of the intenser coldness of outer regions upon water that had come to this earth from storages on a planet or from a reservoir in Starland. Note back to mention of falls of lumps of ice in England. Wherever the deluges were coming from, meteors too were coming. If we can think that the falls of water and falls of the meteors were related, we have reinforcement to our expression that water was coming to this needful earth from somewhere else. 5 remarkable meteors are told of in the monthly Weather Review. In the New York Sun, May 30th, is an account of a meteor that exploded in the sky of Putnam County, Florida, and was heard 15 miles around. In Madras, India, where the drought was very grave, an extraordinary meteor was seen night of June 4th. In South Africa, where the drought was so extreme that a herd of buffaloes had been driven to a pool within 5 miles of the town, in Uitenhage, a meteor exploded with detonations that were heard in a line 40 miles long. May 22nd, great detonating meteor at Ronto, Italy. The meteor that was seen in England or Ireland May 29th is told of in Nature 40-174. For records of 3 other great meteors, see Nature and Cosmos. There was a spectacular occurrence in Dunedin, New Zealand, early in the morning of May 27th. Rumbling sounds, a shock, illumination of the sky, exploding meteor. Some parts of the United States, there had been extreme need for water. In the New Orleans Daily Picayune, are accounts of the gloomy outlook for crops in 6 of the southern states. About 20 reports upon this drought were published in the monthly Weather Review. Rushes of violent mercies, they flooded the south and smashed the north. Crash of a dam in Littleton, New Hampshire. Busted dam near Laurel, Pennsylvania. Think PA. May 1889 in Science of Religion. It is my expression that the 2 outstanding blessings, benefits, or gifts of God to humanity are science and religion. I deduce this, or that the annals of both are such trails of slaughter, deception, exploitation, and hypocrisy that they must be of enormous good to balance with their appalling evils, or the craze of medical science for the vermiform appendix that played out. Now everybody who can pay for it is losing his tonsils. Newspaper headings: family of 8 relieved of their tonsils. Save your pets, dogs and cats endangered by their tonsils. Concentrate in one place this bloody fad or scientific racket, and there would be a fury like that at Andover, New York in May 1889. A bulk of water, foaming as white as a surgeon, jabbed a bolt of lightning into Andover. It operated upon farms and cut off their inhabitants. Trained clouds stood around and handed out more bolts of lightning. A dam broke, and a township writhed upon its field of operations. Another dam broke, but the operations were successes, and if there was much destruction, that was because of a complication of other causes. May 31st, Johnstown, PA. If I can't think of massacre apart from devotions, I think that a lake ran mad with religious mania. It rushed down a valley, and if I'm right about this, it bore on its crest the most appalling of all symbols, the mast of a ship that was crossed by a telegraph pole. In a pogrom against houses, it clubbed out their occupants with bridges. It impaled homes upon the steeples of churches. Its watery Cossacks, mounted on billows, flogged factories. And then, along the slopes of the Conemaugh Valley, it told its beads with strings of corpses. Earthwide droughts, prayers to many gods, something vouchsafed catastrophes. That from somewhere else in existence, vast volumes of water were sent to this arid earth or were organically teleported. Or that, by coincidence, an unseen waterspout after waterspout rose from the Atlantic and rose from the Pacific, from the Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean, and from the Mediterranean, from the Gulf of Mexico, the English Channel, Lake Ontario, or that such an extension of such fishmongering is a brutalization of conveniences. Hold on. Or that from somewhere in a starry shell that is not enormously far away from this earth, more than a Mississippi streamed to this needful earth and forked the disasters of its beneficence from Australia to Canada. 15,000 persons were drowned at Johnstown. Chicago Tribune, June 10th, 1889. The people of Jonestown have lost all faith in Providence. Many have thrown away their Bibles and since the disaster have openly burned them. By the providential, I mean the organically provided for. By God, I mean an automatic Jehovah.